Thank you for watching the Citizens Report. My name is William Donahue. For today's show, I'm going to go through the history of central banking and essentially the fight that America has had against central banking. There was times when we did have it, there was times when we didn't have it. And basically the difference is that when our money is issued by a central bank, the central bank benefits from the currency. When the United States issues the currency, or the person themselves owns the asset and is in control of the asset, it's not based on debt or based on anything like that. You physically hold land, gold, things of that nature that are worth something no matter what, then the person benefits from that money. So that's the difference between the two. Basically, I'm going to go through from 1694, an English central bank that was the currency in the colonies at the time. So it had an effect on the founding of America, and then I'm going to go through until present day and kind of go and show you where we're at. So in 1694, the Bank of England, the first privately owned fractional reserve central bank, was created, and this loaned money created from nothing at an interest. The founder of that bank, William Paterson, said, "The bank hath benefit of interest on all money which it creates out of nothing." So, in response to this, 56 years later, the colonial script was issued, and it was an interest-free, wealth-based money issued by the colonies. So the colonies tried to issue their own money to try and have some control over what was going on. So that was in 1750. Now in 1763, Benjamin Franklin said, "You see, a legitimate government can both spend and lend money into circulation, while banks can only lend significant amounts of their promissory notes, for they can neither give away nor spend but a tiny fraction of the money the people need." So he's talking about the British currency. And then in 1764, 14 years after the colonial script came out, England passed the Currency Act, which England outlawed all forms of paper money and issued by the colonies. So they outlawed all paper money issued by the colonies, and 13 years later, we had 1776, the Revolutionary War. So then that was, and you'll see a quote from Benjamin Franklin after the Revolutionary War, but that was the main driving force of the Revolution. So 1781, the Bank of North America, the first U.S. privately owned fractional reserve bank. This collapsed in 1786, 5 years later, due to massive British counterfeiting and a 41 times increase in the money supply. So this was, a failed attempt at a central bank. It's hard to understand, really, but you got to think about what was happening at the time. So we were creating a country, and there's different individuals or families or groups that own the central banks. So they're competing against each other. And if you own the central bank of two countries, you can play chess against yourself with those two countries. Or if you're competing with another central banker, you play chess against them. but we obviously weren't too good at chess at that time, and I'm not sure who owned our central bank, but it collapsed 1786. So then in 1787, James Madison said, "History records the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over the government by controlling the money and its issuance." And then in 1790, Mayor Armstill Rothschild, founding father of international finance. That's what this website says. If you are interested in reading this, again, it's on U.S. Debt Clock. It's the money history timeline. And that's what I'm going through, but I'm kind of providing my own little spin on it, or my own opinion into some of these things. But Mayor Armstill Rothschild said, "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who passes the laws, or who makes its laws." So that's a little foreshadowing. 1840, the name Rothschild comes back up. So 1791, the first bank of the United States, was a 20-year charter, and it was 80% privately owned. So 20 cents on the dollar was backed by the United States government, and 80% of the dollar was backed by a private owner. I'm not sure who it was at the time. And Benjamin Franklin, at the same time that we switched to this currency, said, "The colonies would gladly have borne a little tax on tea and other matters, had it not been that England took away from the colonies their money, which created unemployment and dissatisfaction. The inability of the colonists to get the power to issue their own money permanently out of the hands of George III and the international bankers was the prime reason for the Revolutionary War." So that's the quote I was talking about. 1809, Thomas Jefferson said, "I believe the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies." 1815, Napoleon said, "When a government is dependent upon bankers for money, they and not the leaders of the government control the situation." So the bankers control the situation. "Since the hand that gives is above the hand that takes. Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and decency. Their sole object is gain." Okay, so they're without patriotism and decency, and their sole objective is gain, to gain for themselves. So that was Napoleon Bonaparte, 1815, and clearly he has an anti-central banking stance. Now, in 1840, the name Rothschild comes back into play at the Battle of Waterloo. So, basically, two people were charged with fraud, and what happened was Napoleon was going after, the town of Waterloo, and the English army, they were fighting, and this was a big deal because had Napoleon won, England probably would have been French at the time, or potentially, So a lot of investors were sitting at the stock exchange waiting to hear news whether or not to sell stocks or buy stocks or whatever, whichever way the economy was going to go based on that battle. So basically there's some opinions that the Rothschild family utilized this information. They got early information about what was going on at the battle. One of the couriers had a letter written to him that said, "I am informed by Commissary White that you have done well by the early information which you had of the victory gained at Waterloo." So basically, that's the only archived evidence that the Rothschilds, took advantage of early knowledge of the battle, meaning that someone probably literally was on the battlefield watching to see which side was going to win so they could go and, play the stacks the way that they had to. So this article was from that time period. It was the London Gazette, and this wrongly reported on what happened in the battle that day, and this caused people to sell stocks, based on false news. But the Rothschild family, nonetheless, whether they were involved or not, did benefit greatly from this. They basically bought the entire British economy for pennies on the dollar, is what how the saying goes. And I missed 1816, the Second Bank of the United States, the same thing as the other time, a 20-year charter with an 80% privately owned central bank. So at the time, England was experiencing that and having to deal with the fallout of this war they were going through with Napoleon. Basically, the news was that Napoleon was dead and that France was going to lose the battle. So, with that key information, benefited greatly and gained a lot of wealth. And at the same time, in 1837, this was going on in the United States. The free banking era, state-chartered banks based on fractional reserve system. So this led to bank runs, and in 1863, right around the same time as the Revolutionary War, the National Banking Act was passed in the United States. Uniform banknotes backed by U.S. treasuries. So basically from 1863 to 1913, the United States was issuing currency. They were printing the money that they needed to spend. It was interest-free. It wasn't based on debt. And that was one thing. And also, Lincoln issued the greenback currency. So it was kind of like it was a U.S. printed note from the U.S. Treasury, $450 million in U.S. notes directly from the Treasury were issued. And Abe Lincoln said, the government should create, issue, and circulate all of the currency and credits needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of the consumers. By the adoption of these principles, the taxpayer will save immense sums on interest. Money will cease to be master and become servant to humanity. And he also said, the money power preys upon the nations in times of peace and conspires against it in times of adversary. It is more despotic than monarchy, it is more insolent than autocracy, and more selfish than bureaucracy. So Abraham Lincoln was trying to make America gain wealth, and the London Times came out with this article. If that mischievous financial policy, which has its origin in North American Republic during the late war in that country, should become indurated down to a fixture, then that government will furnish its own money without cost. It will pay off debts. It will be without debt, and it will become prosperous beyond precedent in the history of civilized governments of the world. The brains and wealth of all countries will go to North America. That government must be destroyed, or it will destroy every monarchy on the globe. So shortly after this, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and Otto von Bismarck had this to say in 1876. The death of Lincoln was a disaster for Christendom. There was no man in the United States great enough to wear his boots, and the bankers went anew to grab the riches. I fear that foreign bankers, with their craftiness and torturous tricks, will entirely control the exuberant riches of America and use it to systematically corrupt civilization. Pretty good prediction. So, 1913, this was prior to the Federal Reserve being created. So, Charles A. Lindbergh, he was a United States congressman, he said, "The Federal Reserve Act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When President Wilson signs this bill, the invisible government of the monetary power will be legalized. The worst legislative crime of the ages is perpetuated by this banking and currency bill." So, beforehand, now after the fact, Woodrow Wilson, kind of like our government does today, plays dumb and says, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." So, Thomas Edison said this: "If our nation can issue a dollar bond, it can issue a dollar bill. The element that makes a bond good makes a bill good also. The difference between the bond and the bill is the bond lets money brokers collect twice the amount of the bond and an additional 20%, whereas currency pays nobody but those who contribute directly in some useful way." So Henry Ford had this to say: "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." So a lot of people nowadays don't know that on the top of a dollar bill, where it says Federal Reserve Note on the top, that is a bill issued by a private company that is in charge solely of printing our money. So they print our money, they collect interest from it. It's a debt-based thing. So when you give someone $1, you're giving them one promise from the Federal Reserve. We promise to give you, or we promise that this is worth $1 in value. But $1 in value could change. It's just worth one Federal Reserve note. So I don't know if you guys seen the movie Jones Plantation. It's called Jones Plantation, and the plantation isn't doing so good. So the owner of the plantation hires somebody to come and fix it. This is a bit of a spoiler alert, but I'm not going to give the whole thing away. It is a good movie. But basically, at one point, they issue Jones credits, and they're paying the slaves to work with the promise of freedom and all these different things. And they buy the stuff they were already getting from the store on the plantation, and basically they never actually get real money, because when they were told they'd be given a penny, they got Jones credits worth 1 penny instead of the penny. So that's basically my analogy here for what the Federal Reserve Bank is doing. Instead of you holding a piece of gold, you get 2,300 printed Federal Reserve notes, which are worth that piece of gold, but the paper itself is backed by debt and a promise that the Rothschild family owned bank, the Federal Reserve, will, maintain some value of this money, or will keep providing the money, I guess. That piece of gold doesn't change value, but the money itself can. That's why you see the price of gold rising, because the value of a dollar is going down. It's not that that ounce of gold is more valuable, it's that the value of money is going down because we're printing more money now. So then, following World War II, the IMF was created, the International Monetary Fund. 186 members of the nations, 186 member nations to secure financial stability. So all the governments, basically, for the most part, signed an international agreement that oversees global financial systems. So the IMF was created. So in 1944, Bretton Woods 44 Nation Agreement to regulate the international monetary system. Each country was to adopt a monetary policy that maintained the exchange rate of its currency within a fixed value. So then in 1963, similar to the greenback, President Kennedy released silver certificate notes. These were U.S. Treasury notes that basically said we have silver bullion that $1 is worth however much silver bullion. So this was a value-backed currency that John F. Kennedy issued. It was probably very controversial, and 5 months after he was assassinated, they were removed from circulation. So then in 1971, Richard Nixon terminated the convertibility of the dollar to gold, as established under the Bretton Woods Agreement. This action created a system where currencies could float in the international market and compete for value as commodities. So now the money is just a commodity, or like a fiat currency. So we basically gave away everything that made the dollar valuable, and we gave away control of the dollar. The world, for the past 100 years, basically, has traded in U.S. dollars. Every deal, for the most part, was done in U.S. dollars. So now there's a breakaway of the BRICS nations creating their own world reserve currency, and there's also organizations that we've signed on to that want to promote central bank digital currencies, and that basically have goals in mind, and member countries meet and work together with the World Economic Forum to create policy that it's international based. So the policy itself is basically with the thought of being for every country. Like, they might want the United States to do something that's not going to benefit the United States. It might benefit Argentina, but it's part of the agreement that we're signed on to. So obviously, as an American citizen, I don't agree with that. I want our country to see the fruits of our labor, and basically we're 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 in a little bit too deep with all these agreements. I think that we need to abolish the Federal Reserve. I think that we need to back our money with something valuable or become self-reliant as a country. We need to focus on what makes our country good, because when you vote, you think that the person you're electing is gonna represent you and your country and try and do the best for you. And if the World Economic Forum is involved, that interferes with their ability to do that, because we are signed on to these agreements. So to me, that's a big conflict. This video is about the World Economic Forum.
The World Economic Forum is famous for its annual week-long meeting in Davos, Switzerland, so much so that WEF and Davos have pretty much become synonymous. The Alpine resort town normally plays host to skiing and hiking enthusiasts, but for 1 week a year, WEF invites business leaders, billionaires, heads of state, royalty, academics, journalists and celebrities to gather 5,000 feet above sea level to address the globe's most pressing challenges. The head of the organization is, and has always been, Klaus Schwab. Back in 1971, the then lesser-known engineer and economist brought his first meeting to Davos. Called the European Management Forum, his objective was to encourage business leaders to be accountable to everyone, not just shareholders. Since then, the list of attendees has expanded globally to include politicians, NGOs, scientists, and even religious and cultural leaders. It was renamed the World Economic Forum in 1987. And for a non-profit, WEF is extremely successful at generating revenue. In its 2022-2023 financial year, it earned nearly $500 million, with media company Semaphore reporting that if it were for profit, it would likely be valued at over $1 billion. With offices in major cities around the world, WEF coordinates several regional meetings and summits, focusing on everything from jobs and AI to the climate crisis. The forum also operates 10 sector-specific centers, such as the Center for Cybersecurity or the Center for Nature and Climate. Each center invites corporations, startups, and governments to get involved through related initiatives. For example, the rapid development of COVID-19 vaccine prototypes during the pandemic was made possible after a global initiative to fight epidemics was launched at Davos in 2016. WEF and Davos are often dubbed as an echo chamber for the elite. They say it lacks financial transparency and holds too much influence for an unelected body.
And then this last clip is Jacob Rothschild being confronted for what his goals and intentions are, and somebody rejecting it face to face to him. So pretty cool stuff. And that's going to do it for the show. So thank you everyone for watching. Enjoy this clip.
Sir, just one thing. We could go on about how your family committed all these acts against society, but we just want to let you know the New World Order has no legitimacy, and that we as a people are not afraid, and we are waking up to the robber barons and the big banksters who are looting this economy with the Federal Reserve.
Well,
thank you for watching The Citizens Report with William Donahue. On this show, we search for knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of the world around us through the lens of an American citizen.